Guys, I'd like to call the committee of the whole for the Village of Cary for Tuesday, October 6, 2015 to order with roll call, please.
McAlpine? Here. Chapman?
Here.
Cavelli? Here. Kosler?
Here.
Kraus?
Here.
Thank you. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Just as a general reminder, our proceedings are videotaped, and tonight we have a live feed through YouTube, so just consider yourselves warned. With that, we'll go ahead and open public comment if there's anybody that has anything they'd like to address the village board with. Anybody here? Nothing? Okay, we'll go ahead and close public comment, please. Moving forward, consideration of the September 15, 2015 committee meeting minutes. Were there any edits, changes, corrections? None? Nope. Put that on the consent agenda. Thank you. The consideration of the September 15, 2015 village board meeting minutes. Any edits, changes, corrections? We'll go ahead and put that on the consent agenda. Thank you. Now moving forward to the presentation of the comprehensive annual financial report, otherwise known as the CAFR, for the fiscal year ended April 30th, 2015, and the auditor's required communications report.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, I'm very pleased to present the committee the Village of Cary's comprehensive annual financial report for the fiscal year ended April 30th, 2015. This report is commonly called the CAFR and contains a wealth of information. Most importantly, the CAFR includes the village's audited financial statements for fiscal year 2015, the independent auditor's report on these financial statements, management's discussion and analysis on these financial statements, or the MD&A. In addition, it also includes required supplementary information, statistical information, which in general has been compiled for the last 10 years, and so on and so on. In just a few minutes, we will summarize a few key financial items. But first and foremost, though, I would like to begin by saying that the village auditors, McLadry, have issued an unmodified or clean opinion on the financial statements for fiscal year 2015. What does this mean? This means that the village's financial statements fairly present in all material respects the financial position of the Village of Cary as of April 30th, 2015, in accordance with accounting principles that are generally accepted in the United States. In short, this is the best opinion that the auditors can render. Mr. Sean Hickey and Mr. Bill Sarb from McLadry are here with us this evening to review some required communications and discuss other audit-related items with you. But before I introduce the auditors, I'd like to provide some background regarding the purpose of the CAFR in general, and then highlight a few key financial items within the CAFR itself. Earlier this year, the Government Finance Officers Association, or the GFOA, awarded the village one of its most prestigious awards called the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for the fiscal year 2014 CAFR. This is the award, of which a copy is included in this year's CAFR. This award represents the 16th consecutive year that the village has received this distinguished award. I'm pleased to report that once again we will be submitting the 2015 CAFR for this consideration by the GFOA, and we're confident that it will qualify again for the award. For the benefit of the new trustees this year, I would like to take just a moment to clarify the difference between an AFR and a CAFR. The AFR, the Annual Financial Report, is a basic financial report that is required by state statutes to be prepared, audited, and filed with the State Comptroller's Office. It is a state requirement. The CAFR, on the other hand, as the name implies, is a much more comprehensive report, as I mentioned earlier. The GFOA established the Certificate of Achievement Award Program to encourage and assist state and local governments to go beyond the minimum reporting requirements to promote the spirit of transparency and full disclosure to the users and the readers of the CAFR.
Mary, who's the GFOA?
The Government Finance Officers Association.
Thank you.
So the users and readers of the CAFR, primarily it's the village board, the residents, the taxpayers, creditors such as bondholders that hold the bonds of the village. This also represents a testament to the village's continued commitment to promote professional management of the financial resources of the local government. Although I recommend that you review the CAFR in whole, I particularly encourage you to read and review two specific parts of the CAFR, the transmittal letter and management discussion and analysis, the MD&A. Transmittal letter provides general information about the village and its local. It discusses long-term financial planning and relevant financial policies, and discusses major village board initiatives that have been accomplished during the year. Finally, it identifies awards and acknowledgements. The MD&A, Management's Discussion and Analysis, provides an overview of all the village's financial activities for the year. It's a very nice comprehensive summary of all the activities during the year. With that said, let's begin with an overview of some of the financial operations for fiscal year 2015. Page 3 of the slides. We begin with a summary of the changes in fund balances. In the last column, we see that some funds have positive changes and others have negative changes. Just to highlight a few items here, the general fund ended the year with a positive change in fund balance of $265,000. We attribute this to some of the following. For example, revenues for intergovernmental sales taxes, sales taxes, income taxes, and use taxes came in over budget by about $150,000. Licenses and permits during the year came in a little better than anticipated by about $34,000. On the expenditure side, in the general government area, came in under budget, about $14,000, which is pretty much in line with budget. Public safety category, we saw savings about $131,000. Primarily, I would say that this is attributable to savings in health insurance line items and contractual services. And for highways and streets, we saw savings of about $240,000, primarily related to the tree removal that were done during the year. When we look at the infrastructure capital improvements fund, we see that there was a negative change in the fund balance of about $635,000. Primarily, this was the planned use of the fund balances, primarily again for the 2015 road program and other road repairs and maintenance during the year for provisional road repairs and resurfacing. Looking at the other capital projects fund, again, we see a decrease or a change in the fund balance by $553,000. Again, a planned use of the fund balance for the purposes of Sunset and Crest acquisitions during the year. The comprehensive plan, we had a number of furniture and fixtures within the police department and village hall, and the purchase of computer equipment as well. In looking at the water and sanitation fund, which is an enterprise fund in and of itself, again, we drew down the fund balance by about $171,000, primarily, again, for the water main replacement that transpired in the year, and the purchase of various vehicle and equipment replacements, such as the Vector and new trucks for the department. Are there any questions so far on this slide?
I just had a question, Mary, on the general fund. Charges for services was under $35,000. What would be an example of like services?
Primarily, it's a variety of items that are captured in this area. The line item that actually came in under budget was the telecommunications revenue.
Okay.
So we've been seeing a slight decline in the revenues collected for
And that's been
telecom
over the
taxes.
past several years?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And then we have transfer into the fund. So because that was underfunded there, are we transferring over money? Is that what the transfers is for? The
That transfer
35,000?
primarily is not because it's underfunded, but it represents funds collected from DUI revenues that have been
Okay.
collected over years, and we transferred those funds for the purpose of purchasing a new vehicle for the police department. It's very
That's what
specific.
the transfer is. We're not
Yes.
doing that because we were underfunded 30. It just happened to be a coincidence that the two are the same
No,
amount.
yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. This next slide, the summary of ending fund balances, is basically the same information we just saw with the revenues and expenditures, except that we added the beginning balance for each fund and the ending fund balance. And particularly for the general fund balance. General fund balance, we show a breakdown of what comprises the ending fund balance for the year into various categories: the non-spendable, restricted, committed, and unassigned. I would like to just point out the balance for the unassigned, which is about $3.7 million. When we compare that to last year, it was about $5,000 difference. So that shows a very stable fund balance. With regards to water and sanitation, their net position fund balance. Once again, the unrestricted balance, about $6 million compared to the total net position of $17 million. When compared to last year, we see a decrease in this fund balance of about $850,000, primarily to do with work done with the water main replacement during the year. This next slide is just a graphic to show revenues by source for the year for all funds. Once again, when we compare these percentages compared to last year, very comparable. I think the percentages are pretty much the same with the exception of property taxes, which decreased 1% from 21% last year to 20% this year. And some miscellaneous revenues, which went up 1% from last year. Other than that, very consistent. And finally, this last graph shows the expenditure side. Once again, when compared to last year, the percentages have been very, very comparable. Nothing to of note there. With that said, that is all I have for this evening regarding the CAFR. I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any before I introduce the auditors.
Just a little quick one. When you said the $35,000 was due to DUI, is that the tow fee? For the adjudication, that $500 tow fee, is that the money that we're collecting from that?
No, just because that actually represents some money that is collected from the county that is remitted back to the village for prosecution of DUIs.
Okay,
It's higher than that as an annual revenue.
the tow fee?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay. At this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Sean Hickey from McLeod to come on up. Thank you, Sean.
Good evening. As Mary mentioned, I'm Sean Hickey from McGladrey. I'm a senior manager, and with me is Bill Sarup. He was a manager on the engagement. And we're here tonight just to present what's required by auditing standards to the board. And that's what the little presentation I have is just about our required communications, and it's the results of the audit. Just to mention, there was a new state law passed January 1 that auditors are now required to make that formal presentation to the board. We've done that in the past here at Cary, but at some other locations, possibly they weren't doing that. So that's something we've been doing. But just to make you aware that now it is required by state law for auditors to communicate the results of the audit to the boards. First slide is just the client service team. The required communications, like Mary mentioned, the results of our audit was a clean opinion, unmodified opinion. That's the best opinion, meaning that we didn't find any issues with the way the financial statements or the transactions were recorded. We do have to notify you throughout our audit. We have to identify significant accounting estimates. These estimates require management judgment. In some cases, it requires a specialist to be hired to help them calculate certain types of transactions. The ones that we identified and that we want to communicate to you is pension obligations and other post-employment benefits, depreciation and accumulated depreciation, which has to do with your long-term capital assets. And then the third is investments. Other communications, we're required to tell you that we had no disagreements with management. There was no other consultations with other accountants. We had one issue that we discussed with management that I'll go over a little bit later when we talk about new government accounting standards. There was no alternative accounting treatments, and we had no audit adjustments. Mary mentioned, kind of how the CAFR is laid out. I just want to point out to you again that other information in the CAFR, although we do not audit it, we are required to review the information and make sure that it's consistent with what we did audit. And that's the management discussion and analysis. And really that MD&A for short kind of gives you, it's supposed to give like in a layman's terms what happened from one year to the next for all the different activity of the village. The other is the required supplementary information, which is just additional information like budget to actual for certain funds, as well as some of the future disclosures that are required by pension plans. Other written communication every year. When we complete our audit, we'll require management to sign what we call a management representation letter. In a nutshell, it basically says that they provided everything that we requested and we had full and open access to the entire village. And that kind of moves into the next 2 points, but that we did have full and open access to all the books and had great cooperation from village management. To the new accounting standards. So the Government Accounting Standards Board is the one that issues new standards that government agencies have to follow. Last year, I might have mentioned these two new ones that relate to pension. They're significant and they're coming out. So the first one is GASB 67. And what GASB 67 required the police pension fund to have new disclosures, and really the disclosures kind of really reflect more of what you would find in the commercial world, the business world. And so what it shows is all the activity of the assets that you put aside, plus calculating liabilities. And so in this situation, Village Cary is a little unique to some other entities. The police pension, we audit that and we issue a separate audit report. So in this first year, when we implemented GASB 67, all of those new disclosures are in the separate police pension report. Now, the fund shows up in the CAFR. And so kind of in this first year and second year, I'll go to the next slide, which is GASB 68. GASB 68 is for the employer, which is the village. And so next year, what is going to happen is the information that we had in the police pension report this year will have to be reflected in your CAFR next year. So that's a significant occurrence. A couple things to mention about that is in GASB 68, in the past, when you had pension funds, you only disclosed certain information about the liabilities that you promised to those who are eventually going to retire. In GASB 68, now you're going to have to record that in your financial statements. That long-term liability is really what you're kind of looking at. The issue that we discussed with management is that the village hires an actuary, and because there's so many assumptions that have to go into this calculation, it's a pretty significant task to make sure that they come up with a reasonable calculation for all these future benefits that have been promised. And preliminarily, we took a look at what they're going to have for next year. And we just had mentioned to management, just make sure that the actuary is using all the standards, because the actuaries follow their own standards, just make sure that they're following the proper standards, because ultimately next year what you want to make sure is that the information that you record in your financial statements for the pension liability is accurate. So, other than that, that's all I had, unless you guys have any questions.
Any questions?
No?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate you having this tonight, not tomorrow night. We'll be watching a Cubs game.
Mary, did you have any follow-up for the committee on this at all?
If the board is okay with it, we'd like to proceed then at the next board meeting for formal approval of the CAFR. If there are any changes between now and then, of course, it'll be communicated, but we really don't anticipate any at this point.
And I'm just going to explain that Mary and I, in the past couple days, have worked with Sean and his team. We've got, as Sean indicated, with the new GASB regulations, especially as it applies to next year, we've got some more homework to do on some of the mortality table assumptions in the pension funds. And so I've spoken with Sean at length the last couple days, and we have a few ideas on how to work on that for Carrie. And so I believe that through our workshop process as well as committee, I'll be back to you with some thoughts on how we'll address this next year. I just wanted to put that on the record and indicate that that's a work product separate from what gets considered at the next board meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Moving along to the discussion of the annual treasurer's report for the Village of Cary for the fiscal year ended April 30th, 2015. Mary, you're right back there.
Thank you, Mayor. Included in your packet this evening is the annual treasurer's report for the fiscal year 2015, once again. It basically summarizes what we just discussed in the CAFR. It is a summary or statement of money received and expended during the year and wages paid for the fiscal year. It is a requirement that it be published with a local paper within 6 months of the fiscal year end and filed at the county. I'd be happy to answer any questions related to it.
Any questions? Good.
Thank you. If it's okay then to proceed with this item at the board level for approval?
Yes?
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
Thank
What
you.
did you say? I'm sorry.
To take it to the
To take it
board
to the
level.
board level.
I want to thank Mary and her staff for their hard work on this process. As many of you know, I mean, honestly, from May to now, this has been priority one for Mary and her team, and she's done a fantastic job on this once again. This is the third year McGladrey has audited us. As we've turned over a lot of things in the village, we brought in new auditors to take a fresh look at things, and Mary's team does that as well every week, and we thank her for her efforts on that, so thanks.
Great job. Yeah.
Fun times, huh? Now you need a vacation. Okay. Thank you. Moving forward with a discussion on janitorial services. Eric.
Thank you, Mayor and trustees. This evening, our discussion is focusing on janitorial services for our Village Hall, Police Department, and Public Works facility. It's part of our continuous evaluation of our operations and attempts to become as efficient as possible and enable us to work smarter and more cost-effective. We've evaluated different processes and areas that we can redeploy our current existing resources in order to maintain our other core services. During our previous budget workshop discussions, we had discussed the option of outsourcing or privatizing our custodial services for these facilities and then redeploying our current maintenance utility worker that is assigned to those duties back into the field. This evening, we would like your feedback on the draft scope of services that was provided, as well as the opportunities and the other improvements to services that we would realize with this work. Primarily the ability to, again, redeploy that maintenance and utility worker to operations such as landscape maintenance, assigning him a primary snowplow route as opposed to a backup route, which would enable us to fill one of our holes in our staffing for that service. tree trimming, and other general street-related duties. The work for this outsourcing contract is currently budgeted in our 2015-16 budget. So our next step would be to issue a request for proposals if the board is supportive of the concept, and then we would update you on the results. The primary bid contract that we would suggest would enable us to cover Village Hall and Police Department. And then if the unit prices are favorable enough, we'll also include within our current budget amount the Public Works facility. The contract would, at this time, is recommended to expire through the end of April 30th, 2017, with optional, at the village's option, one-year extensions from there. And with that, I'm happy to entertain any questions you might have.
I'll add one other comment. It comes up from time to time. As the board's aware, we recently approved a 5-year agreement with the Service Employees International Union, and there is language in the labor contract regarding outsourcing. We have favorable language in the agreement from the standpoint of outsourcing new services. Essentially, we have the obligation to notify and discuss, not ask, but in this case, as part of what the board understands, where we looked at our new contract from frankly, the prism of a new state budget environment, this was one of the elements that the union was comfortable with us taking outsourced. Some level of discussion, and we didn't have to ask, but it was openly discussed, and they're aware of why we're doing this and how the talent's being redeployed. So we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
David?
Eric? As always, when we go for a request for proposals, is how do we advertise it? Where are we advertising? And how do we ensure that Cary businesses will be able to get some kind of notification?
Well, certainly. In concurrence with our current purchasing policy, we issue a request for proposals on a qualifications-based selection as far as the criteria from the scope. And obviously, we factor in the unit costs and the references of those contractors. We advertise on our village website, and we do post it in the Northwest Herald. And then we keep it open for typical amount of time is 2 weeks, but depending on the contracts, we have left them open longer with the response times. In this case, we'll likely also conduct a pre-proposal meeting, just so that any interested contractors can get an opportunity to tour our facilities and clarify any questions on our scope. That will just enable us to get, I think, the most accurate and precise bids from those contractors. Local contractors, if there are any that are interested, we tend to, with any project, also do direct mailings to notify them that this opportunity is out there. But in submitting to the Northwest Herald, the local paper, there's various contract services that vendors utilize, Demand Star, Dodge bidding services. They basically, what they do is they keep track of all the newspaper postings and advertisements for these types of bids, and then people subscribe to those services to let them know which ones are applicable to their industry.
Okay, if, let's say Brad Ball called up and asked, is there anything going on? I mean, is it something that you would share with the chamber that there's a bid available? No, I never.
Yeah, I can answer that a couple different ways. One is that, as you're aware, we use the Municipal Purchasing Initiative. We've been a member of for a number of years. They have a contract. It seems to be a little bit out of scale for what this is a smaller job. Yeah. Over time, I've seen local government agencies that do outsource, such as the school district or the park district, partner together. At this time, I don't believe our other sister agencies do, but I could see that being the growth pattern for this over time. Right now, I mean, to answer your question directly, it's of a size budget amount where some smaller operations, conceivably even from the community, could compete for it, because it's not a gigantic project per se, and not that they couldn't handle gigantic projects, but this is of a size that should be able to be handled fairly straightforward manner. So
thank you very much.
We also do have some very unique parameters in our scope of services, given that they would be entering and accessing our police department. So certain joint bids with non-law enforcement agencies sometimes have some challenges. So that's why we prefer to set the specs and the scope to what we require for security.
Thanks, Eric.
And I'm not familiar with, that's all I ask, and we'll comply with our standards for procurement as well as any questions of prevailing wage or those sorts of things, which sometimes come into play with government work. So we'll make sure we comply with what we need to.
One of the benefits that you state here, is everybody else,
Jim was gonna-
one of the sorry, Jim. One of the benefits you state would be the reassignment of an existing maintenance and utility worker back into the field. With the current employee that's doing the job now, would he be the one that is reassigned back into the field and be able to handle that work?
Yes.
And when we talk about cost savings, are we looking at cost savings in terms of salary because we're eliminating the benefits that we're offering this person? I mean, I know I have an example. Working with the school district, we went through this a couple of years ago where they privatized the janitorial services, and really the only savings was that the school was able to eliminate the benefits that were paid to those employees. You know, so I'm wondering, what are we really saving here? Are we eliminating an employee that gets the benefits that are afforded to by being an employee of this village?
No, the savings here are in that we're able to expand and continue to uphold the services we provide as the core services in the Public Works Department. The employee that would be redeployed away from the custodial services is a full-time employee and would remain a full-time employee, but he would just be then assigned to the Public Works Department in the field. So the net savings is in the services and the delivery of those services.
I'll answer it also from a historical standpoint. When I got here in 2011, the board, rightfully so, during the recession had to make many difficult cuts. And as the economy continued to take a while to bounce back, we revisited staffing in 11. And at that time, this position was full-time. The janitorial position was fully dedicated, one full FTE position to the function. And in the first couple months I was here, I cut that back to half-time and sent the other half back to operations because we were short. And we had proposals to add positions, which I cut. And as you're aware, when we did the restructuring, we cut one position from our operations. This is part of the way to properly add back service level and keep, certain number of full-time staff on hand for the variety of operations. So I'd be glad, if you'd like, to give you more of a detailed spreadsheet about the cost savings concept to that, because I understand your question. It's part of really a puzzle piece that ties to the labor contract, ties to reducing headcount, and ties to freeing up this individual's time to go back to more day-to-day operations, in the field, as opposed to at Village Hall dusting and cleaning.
Which is what you feel you need.
Yes, particularly in the field and with the winter operations. With the reduction of that position, we're not refilling in the contract with SEIU and our field staff. This will enable us to make up for that slot in our an operation to maintain those for those larger events.
The employee that we currently have doing this job, was he previously out in the field?
He was, as Chris mentioned, since the reassignments, he's been splitting it 50-50.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and I mean, as you recall from the contract, we created maintenance and utility worker positions 1 and 2. So this is a maintenance utility worker 1 position, and the concept all along has been to spread out duties. There's plenty of work, and finding the right assignments for the right people is part of what Eric does. So I don't see any issue with the incumbent with respect to this change.
Chris, I sort of echo Jeff's concerns. If we have to pay prevailing wage, I don't see how outsourcing it and paying prevailing wage is going to save us any money, aside from the benefits, like Jeff said. So if I'm open to receiving some of that information that you're willing to supply. In my history of unions, I've never seen unions that are willing to let any type of work go, no matter how dirty it is. So I'm surprised by that. But I'm just wondering, I'm concerned about the outsourcing. We continue to outsource a lot of things in the village, and that concerns me. But I would like to see, is this really going to save us money or not? I understand that a worker can do a different job that is maybe a higher hourly rate to do other services at the village, but I'm not convinced at this point that we're saving money by doing this.
Very good. I mean, we can bring back more answers to these questions. That's why we bring it to committee, and we'll see what the pricing is through the process, as Eric explained. And take your feedback, glad to do it. I will say that as a municipal best practice, I typically see municipalities with outsourced janitorial throughout the suburbs. But the issue with the union, you're right. I mean, you don't always see a union saying, okay, go ahead and do it. You're right. Here they did. And so at a high level, assuming that there's a decent service level and management of what's completed, that's an important part. I mean, quality of service is part of what Trustee Kraus was saying, as well as the cost of service. It is somewhat of a new experiment for us, but again, from a best practice standpoint, pretty common. So I appreciate the feedback, and we'll be able to bring back to the village board report some more answers to these specific questions, which is why we talk about it here.
I think it also said you could terminate the contract at any period within 30 days. So in a sense, if it wasn't working, we'd have an option to revisit it also, correct? And that's
Yeah, and the
safeguarding it.
presumption we have somebody available to do the work, you're correct.
The current employee that we have in this position, what is his description? Is he a maintenance and utility worker one?
Yeah, correct.
So why do we need to really, can't we just pull him back as a maintenance utility worker one and have him full-time in the public works? And why do we have to say we're going to privatize janitorial services? Is that something under the public works contract that says we have to have that as part of the public works contract?
No, it's just that.
Why don't we just say, okay, you're going back to public works, now we're going to find a new person to do the janitorial services in the village, for the village hall and the police department and that what?
That is the concept, just that new person would be an outside contractor. Yeah, it's not a specified work task in the contract. It's more of an essential function. The public areas, common areas need to be cleaned, garbage needs to be removed, carpets need to be vacuumed. It's that daily upkeep and that very basic custodial level services
Oh, I'm not
that just
saying
need
that
to
we
be
don't need
maintained.
that, but I'm just saying I'm not sure why it's all tied under then the public works umbrella. Why?
I can answer
Why are
that.
we saying, do you kind of see where I'm coming from? Okay.
Speaking from experience, I happen to do, in my 28 years of doing this, I've dealt with a lot of municipalities, and it's a non-union position. The wages are substantially lower than you would pay a union employee. You don't have the benefits. Part of the benefits of going with a outside service is that they manage all the costs of cleaning supplies, the equipment. We don't have to have that anymore. We don't have that obligation. They supply that as part of their contract. It's kind of a way to streamline things. There's more accountability in there. You can deploy your union labor out into the field where it should be. The cost of a service coming into our facility should be substantially cheaper than having a part-time. Well, if you have a full-time person doing part-time work in this, it's much more cost-effective to have somebody else that's more accountable. They come in the evenings, they don't disrupt service. Our current, the way it works right now, he works during business hours, which could be distracting, and it's really not as professional as he'd like to be. So from my experience, going to an outside service is much more cost-effective. I've had many customers in municipalities, the Village of Wheeling, Village of Morton Grove. I've done stuff for Mount Prospect. All of these types of services have regular union contracts, and janitorial always falls under itself. And I actually have a union addendum that would allow me in some of this, especially if I do any work in the city, I have a union addendum that I could do, although I don't do work in the city because it's just crazy. But it's a better way to control your operation.
Yeah, I'm not against this. All I'm saying is I'd like to see some dollar figures. That's it. If Chris could provide those, then
Yeah.
maybe we could take it further. So.
Sure.
I just have a quick question.
Yeah.
On the back, I'm just looking at the hours, 6 p.m. to 5 a.m. Are those the hours that you're going to put the bid out for, or is that just something rough?
Yeah, those would be the working hours that we would allow the contractor access. So
They wouldn't necessarily be here, 11 hours a day,
Right.
would they?
No,
Okay.
yeah, that's the
Okay.
window of operation because we want to keep
Gotcha.
them.
Okay.
yeah,
All
like I
right.
said,
Just wanted to
interfering.
clarify that.
Midnight shift will be super, kind of around and
Right.
whatever.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, for
Those
clarity.
are very generous access hours.
They're very generous.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving forward to a discussion on video gaming revenue. I think I will turn this over to Trustee Chapman. Did you have some comments?
Well, while you're
Chris,
developing
go ahead.
those, this issue is brought forward as an item that was asked for further discussion. We collected some information that we hoped was helpful to your dialogue. We gave you some data about some of the gaming revenues that have come in. We're aware of the fact that there is this short-term, hopefully, delay in the state distributing those funds to the municipality, being us. You know, we believe those funds are coming to Cary. It's a matter of timing, but the issue here, I think, is thinking about how these are essentially now baked into our revenue model as a village. What should these funds, be dedicated for? We had some level of discussion at a very early level in the March budget workshops, as in essentially calendar year 2014, we approved the permitting of some of these facilities to have gaming licensing, and so revenues were coming in, and we started to see and gave the board some trends in March of 2015, but now we've got better data, and it's not a small amount of money. I wanted to get the feedback from Trustee Chapman and his thoughts and others. Typically, we look at these items in the context of the overall budget, which we typically do in the January to March timeframe. This issue, if there's other thoughts to this revenue or new revenue that's grown above the licenses that are out now, let's talk about it, decide what the board sees fit to have these dedicated for. So I'm happy to answer any questions along with Mary and staff.
David?
Anybody have any questions of Chris, what he presented? Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that. One of the things that we as a village have looked at several times over the past, I'll say 20 years, was a revenue stream. And each time that I came as a community representative to the board to ask for some funding for a community-wide event, we were told that there was no revenue stream. There was no money set aside in the village budget for those type of things. What we're asking for in the presentation that I sent to you all was that we set aside a $40,000 line item, put that in the budget, and have that be everything else above the $40,000 goes back into the general fund. So as long as the funds are not taken out, no further funds come into the community fund of keeping it at $40,000. But should the chamber or the ski club or the historical society come and seek funding from the village, that amount, if the board grants it, it goes out, and then at the next disbursement from the state, that $2,000 or $1,000 or $5,000 would then come back to fill that level up to $40,000. And again, everything else, as the revenues will continue to get released, goes back to the general fund.
Any comments?
My comments on it would be, what types of rules and procedures would we have for disbursement of the funds?
I can answer that. You mean in terms of dedicating them on like a...
Well, in terms of if whatever organization wanted some money for their event, what qualifies them to receive money, how much money, what's the process to apply?
We'd have to have a policy written that
Yeah.
would detail that completely, and at the front end, I think, completely define what your expectations were before it was marketed, so that the board was comfortable with any kind of disbursements if that program was at all funded. You'd absolutely have to have that.
On Friday, I asked to the secretary at IML if there were any communities that had that, and she said that she would research it. And so as soon as she gets back to me, I'll send that on. And I told her that we were specifically looking for policies that already existed. That way we didn't have to create our own. Because really it was based on presentations from the groups, and then based on the need. But I agree, we'll develop a policy before we grant that money.
Yeah, I think it's similar to the economic development funds, and I haven't seen strict procedures on that. I know there are some general rules, and it concerns me that we need to have procedures before we implement this.
That's
I'm
fine.
for giving money for community events for organizations to a point. I don't think we're a gravy train. We shouldn't be. It should be a self-supporting event. But in that same vein, I'm willing to, or we should be willing to support our community and the events they have. So, yeah.
Thanks. I'll bring that back to you and pass you on those policies and to copy those to Chris.
I want to point out that, we've had this issue come up from time to time in the time I've been here from various groups. And we obviously had the most recent example with the Fall Festival. From a budgetary standpoint, the board at the time didn't really know. We had some projections about the gaming revenues, and so it was dedicated to the general fund. So those are subsidizing just general operations. So if the funds are pulled out for a special use purpose, they're not there for general fund operations. So, I mean, just so you're cognizant of that. But this is a new revenue source. There are communities that, as we watch the towns in the county and other counties consider video gaming, yes, some dedicated this to a specific purpose when they adopted it. Our neighbors dedicated it, I believe, for a while to a downtown tree fund. I mean, we had Emerald Ash Borer, and there were concerns about replacements. And so towns there are some precedents for that based on what they determine the need to be. There's no shortage of need for ways to deal with shortages in the general fund, but I understand the comment with respect to this unique revenue source for a unique community purpose. So,
Were there any other questions?
Just, I was going to say, I'd like to get a little more information too from Dave, but overall, I support this notion of having this fund available for community groups that would come before us and present a valid case and a reasonable case, that would benefit the entire community and something that is really good for the community.
And a proposed budget, I'd like to see.
Yeah.
you're saying for an event that would be
Yes.
applying?
They would have to be
Yes.
credible.
And so I'm just trying to flush it out so that we have, it sounds like some level of agreement on the concept. But 40,000 is the cap, and we haven't yet discussed, well, does that mean three grants, 2 grants, 1 grant, 10 grants? I mean, those things don't necessarily also have to be completely pinned down, but I think we should at least think about that because, some of the early questions will be, well, how do we qualify? How do we ask for it? And then, is it tied to, what the event itself costs or, and how many grants are there? Those are the kind of things
Sure.
that'll come up.
And that's what the 7-step program it would outline, that each group that comes before the village would have to present. It's the first 7 steps of the project. It includes the who, what, when, where, and why. It also includes the proposed budget. It includes all of the contact people. It includes the insurance. One of the things that we want to make sure is that the village is listed. So all of those things are spelled out in the 7 steps of the single project provision. And you'll see that along with the policies, if I can find those, that are out there.
And is it special events solely or special programs? Those are things you don't have to answer tonight, but, we've talked about historical society.
Yeah.
We've talked about community arts program.
I think when it comes before us, we would know it, It quacks like a duck, it's a duck, or I don't know, I'm trying to think of the expression, but, when something comes before us and it's a good event, I think we'll know it. If something comes before us and we're like, I don't think so. And then you were saying about the amounts too. I think the chamber, the amount for the Fall Fest, I think that was probably an outlier. 25,000 is what they wanted. I think that's an outlier. I was thinking more in line of, $1,000, $3,000 to just help put some seed money in there to get them on their feet and then see if it is a viable option. Kind of like the same way that we did with the Fall Fest, that we were hoping that eventually we'd be able to wean them off of what we were providing for them, but just to get them up on their feet and running in terms of a community event that would benefit everybody.
Understood.
Well, it may be best as far as the amounts of the grants to base it on the budget
Overall
of the
budget.
event, a
Correct.
percentage,
Absolutely.
20% max, whatever it would be,
Right.
whatever you decide.
Cap it out.
And I mean, it is important. I mean, we're talking community groups. We're talking about service groups. We're talking about ad hoc groups, potentially, right? We're not talking about other government bodies. We're not talking about, right?
No.
For the most part, we're talking about more of the smaller type operations, I would assume. right?
Community-oriented.
Okay.
Yeah, I like this. I just see it being very subjective, and I see we would have to have a strong policy procedures because I support it. I agree with helping these community organizations. I just worry that January 1, you're going to get all these applications right away, and you're going to have to pick and choose. And then when you talk about percentages with budgets, well, I can go crazy with that because I know I'm going to get 20% from the village, and then I can eat that all up and not share with the other people. So again, I'm not against this. I like this. I think it's good. I just think strong policies and procedures are going to be important.
I think we have community groups in the community too that we already know exist and have some footing. You know, it's not going to be some fly-by-night group that comes before us and then all of a sudden we're like, oh yeah, let's, throw some money at them and that.
True. But I think we still have to be very careful to
Absolutely.
make sure, because we may say, we may not know them, it could be a new organization that's trying to get started, and then we're sitting in the seat saying, do we think you're really a good organization, or do we not think you're a good organization? So we just have to be, I think, very, very careful and very on task with what the policies and procedures are for them to come forward with it.
And I think we should have a caveat in there. If there's something with the general fund that year that we need to cover, that money could be transferred over.
Right.
However the auditors do that.
I
I think that's a good
understand.
idea. Don't we have any kind of guidelines set up already from the chamber, doing?
Yeah, I mean,
process?
I'm
We
just
have-
fleshing out the issues so we all understand them. I mean, and I think that you'll find that you may score some projects or concepts. What if it draws X amount of people to the downtown? What if it's an event that we don't have now? What if it's a
Right.
food truck event? What if it's, I don't know. I mean, that you might like because it has offsetting benefits. I mean, I think you've given us good feedback, and I agree. We can give you some kind of sculpted thoughts and then let you decide and adopt it as policy. Thank you.
Thanks for the comments. Moving to discussion on mayoral appointments. You kicking us off?
Yes, again, this is an item it came forward from trustee request for committee discussion. Staff and I simply collated the various boards and commissions that folks from the community agree to serve on and are selected upon typically by mayor and village trustees. They're laid out before you here with some of the guidelines and rules. We're happy to answer any questions on this matter that you might have.
This discussion about mayoral appointments was one that's come from trustees in the past, and so we promised we would help to keep this up in the forefront. What we're looking for is to increase the opportunities for our residents to apply for appointments that are available on commissions within the village, starting with the zoning committee, and we passed on the wording of the proposed way that the vetting would be out there is that we would advertise for these openings rather than just having it with the mayor making appointments and then the board approving them. Is we wanted to give the opportunity out there to have the public available to be notified that the appointments were, the positions were available and that they could apply, and that was to increase the number of applicants that we have. Some of the wording in the ordinance, and obviously Attorney Coppedge will have to twist the legal words, but when Kim and I sat down and started taking it apart, there's some things that in the ordinances for appointments that really can't be. I think they would create chaos, such as specifically having the village attorney's position come up for, general advertisement. But we wanted to start someplace to increase the opportunities for our residents to get involved, to make it a more open and transparent process. And we'll be asking for your support as we ask Attorney Coppedge to present back the finished legal language to us. And then we would go to a vote to amend our village ordinance.
And while you're reflecting on that, I'll make two quick comments to try to isolate the conversation a bit. Just by way of historical background, I'll start at the bottom, the Police Pension Board. You have 2 appointments that are controlled by the board, and the other 3 by law are an employee, a retired employee, and a third appointee that represents the employees of the pension fund that you don't appoint or control. The other 2 positions, one of them was advertised when it became vacant by a person that moved on to other community service. It was advertised. There was a handful of applicants in an interview process. Mr. Sporl was appointed to the pension board. He had previously served District 26. The other gentleman that's on that board, Mr. Bruce Brandwine, community resident that's been active in the police industry for many years. He's been on that board for many years. It's kind of a specialty type niche with the pension aspect, which we learned tonight. The police commission was completely replaced since I've been here, completely. It needed to be. And so that was completely done. The zoning board comes up when there are vacancies that expire. So I think for the most part, I mean, you can talk about all of it, but I think most of this is zoned in on item 1.
Most of it. And we do appreciate the fact of the advertising. We're just looking to codify it, that's all.
Do you have a copy of what you and Kim worked on? You're referring to an ordinance that you had drawn up?
Yeah, actually, did I send it to everybody on the board? Okay, I just sent it to Chris and Mike.
I'd like to see. Let me explain, just so that there's a matter of understanding about the past zoning board appointments that I've made. Since I've been mayor, I had one full appointment of my own that we went out for applications. I interviewed about 7 different people for the position, and that person landed in the seat was Jennifer Myers. She was the most qualified, and she was the one that the board was able to give their consent and advice on consent. With the last zoning board member that I reappointed or attempted to reappoint, she was a holdover from the previous mayor who had appointed her in midterm. She fulfilled an obligation. She stepped in and filled it. And she went through the process. I had spoken to the previous mayor about that at that time. She went through the process, through an application process. So she had came into the middle of a term, and I thought that it was in the best interest of the village just to continue to give her an opportunity to continue with her service. She had not filled a complete term. She was, I think she's a valuable member. She's very ground to the community, and she understands. That's why I made that decision. So when we've had solid openings, I have gone out to the public, we've advertised them, and I've interviewed every single person that turned in an application was interviewed. And then we made the determination on that. If the board wants every single opportunity that comes up to be presented to the public and go out for applications, then so be it. But I want it as a matter of record that I followed everything that you're asking for. I have done, with the exception of this last ZPA, and she fulfilled. She came in the middle of a term, and I thought it was a good opportunity to continue her service.
No, you did, Mark. Nobody's refuting that. That had, again, as I explained to you, it has nothing to do with you or your performance. You've been stellar as far as that. You've been out front with it. It's just a matter of codifying it so that this was the will of the trustees of the last board, and it's been talked about several times on the board level in the past year, and that's why we're just bringing that forward. But thank you, Mark.
Yeah, there was stuff in the ordinance when we looked at it that says you don't have to do that. And should another mayor come in or anything else, then, who's to say that they will do that? And so that's one of the things we discussed, is that just kind of keep it consistent throughout. And that was what our discussion focused on.
Any other comments?
Dave, you made a comment about the attorney, not putting the attorney out there for the village or something, but we do vote on whether or not we approve the appointment of the attorney.
Oh, yes, but what I'm saying is not like, putting out an email blast saying, hi, any lawyers want to, be the village attorney? I'm not comfortable with how that might work, rather than letting staff work their way through, with legal counsel to bring the recommendations to the board, that's all.
Right, not put it in the weekly newsletter.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, thank you. Well, I look forward to your description and what Attorney Coppich has to say. All right, moving forward to an update on Metro. Chris?
Thank you, Mayor. As I briefed the board by email yesterday, we continue the process of discussion with respect to the concept of placing a warming shelter facility on the inbound side of the railroad tracks. We met with IDOT yesterday, went fairly well. They asked for some more information, which is what we expected, and it's a good sign that they're continuing to research what's appropriate in the right-of-way adjacent to Route 14 Northwest Highway. Eric's already put together a draft of what they asked for yesterday. As you recall, we acquired the services of TY Lin Engineering, who helped us to create the concept plan, the layout. That gentleman was with us yesterday and helped articulate to IDOT what we're trying to do here and why. His services are up in terms of the work that he's performed under the scope that I authorized. We also had some legislative assistance to move the process along. That work has been completed. That was tied to both the Metro project and, as you recall, the Sunset Crest third property that we then subsequently acquired. So those services are up. We're now at this crossroads where we're able to move forward on what IDOT needs. Where I sent a copy of the draft meeting minutes that I had, which are being finalized and edited by IDOT today. I sent those to Rick Mack, who's the McHenry County liaison to Metro. He appreciated those comments, being kept in the loop. I plan to meet with Metro, just to get them up to speed. There was another side meeting that I became more aware of yesterday. TY Lin, on our behalf, attended a meeting with Metro, with Union Pacific, starting to talk about the other property that needs to be, possibly acquired or arrangements to be made to allow it to be built upon UP property. So that's a good sign that those parties did do that. And there's some thoughts about that not being, it's a long process because of what's involved. But the fact that the wheels are turning is a good sign. So, we're in this quarter. Our objectives are to get through the IDOT process, talk with Metro. We're probably going to need to consider as a village, with your direction unanimously, the concept of becoming the lead agency in theory on the project. There's a pro and a con to that we can talk about. One of the pros is because it gives you more control over the project and how it looks and the elements of how it's completed, but it also would probably help speed it along. There's still procedures and policies we have to follow for procurement, et cetera, because it's federal money, and we'd have to talk about how the cash flows through that job. But that's probably going to be a big decision for us this quarter to make. And, especially as we head into budgeting phase, we're through the audit now. Now we head to budget, and, we're going to have to talk about our commuter parking funds, as had been held as a placeholder by the prior board, for further discussion. We budgeted our balance in the parking account for this project. We've spent a minimal amount on just some of the assistance that we've received to get to this place. But, you'll decide, how to handle that prospectively on cost sharing with Metro, et cetera. I mean, it doesn't have to be a balanced scale on cost sharing to be the lead agency, but, certainly there's some need to at least consider some contribution for the overall project to hopefully end up with a missing building, in its existing footprint, so that property can be reused for a better downtown use. Those kind of issues, you'll all decide those ultimately. So it's moved along, still more hurdles to work through, but, positive dialogue. And I suspect that by January 1, we'll have a better feel for how, and you'll be deciding how this is going to play out. And, I think some sort of possible intergovernmental agreement with Metro is going to be necessary to execute the project. So any questions or any thoughts at this point? I may need, we're still assessing post yesterday's meeting, some minimal services to continue the design process We're ultimately, if we decide to be the lead agency, we have to go out for proposals for architect and probably engineering services, et cetera. We're just at this point on a concept phase trying to create the project to then go out and bid. So a minimal amount within our budget authority may be needed beyond what's been spent. But if it's anything significant, I'll come back and talk to you about it. Thank you. That's all I had.
Any other questions for Chris? Thank you. Moving to department head or department updates. Mary, you have anything? Not enough today? How about Eric?
Just a real brief update from Public Works. As you alluded to, the closing for the third property, the Sunset Crest project, was completed on Friday. So we are now officially in possession of the first three properties. Demolition is underway and actually 90% wrapped up on the first two properties already. We will, now that the closing has occurred on the third, we're going to start the process of, just like the other homes, the required asbestos inspections, reports, and then we'll do a bid, request for bid for that third property as well. Just a reminder, this is what we started with from those storms in June, which led to this work early last week. The first home on Crest, the second home on 57 Sunset. Some grading work and backfilling the holes that were left with an interim condition that will seed to this date, which is, that's the 301 Crest location. The 57 Sunset property also has been left at a similar state. They finished up that grading today. So progress is moving along, and we're still in the design phase with our consultant on the final grading plan, which we'll then submit to FEMA and NIEMA for review. But just wanted to share with you the progress to this point, and that we're pleased to announce that last acquisition.
I've got a couple of comments. Number one is, Chris, do you know, at the meeting that we had when all the residents were here, did we keep a list of all those people's names that wanted to speak?
Yeah, there's a sign-in list from that meeting that's on the record.
I would love to get a copy of that, and I want to Google them all and make sure that they get, especially the fella who had lived there 16 years and had flooded 3 times. Boy, that's great, and the residents are overjoyed over there, by the way, just so you know. I'll have to remember the other question, Eric. This is a pretty emotional part. Oh, yes. Dear residents, you do not have to live in a floodplain in order to acquire flood insurance here in Cary. Just contact your homeowner's insurance person. There is a policy, and I think it's $285. May not cover everything, but it covers many things. So whatever you've heard that it's not available to you, it is. And please take advantage of it. That was it. Thanks, Eric.
Public service announcement.
Yes.
Thanks, Eric. Jake?
I guess that was a good message for the folks that are watching right now. I checked my phone and we actually have 4 people that are tuned in online. So I guess it's a start, but certainly looking to hear feedback from the village board, if you hear from residents and those folks that watch. We're always trying to improve it. We've talked about some additional ways to improve our live streaming just so we can get more information out to the residents. Anyone have any questions related to the live streaming?
No, I think it's great. I'm glad you came up with it in such an economical way. So, nice job.
And it's also available later.
Yeah, absolutely. And it should be available right after the meeting too, so there isn't any upload anymore. So,
Perfect.
and then finally too, the chief obviously isn't here. He had a department report in your packet, touch base with him. There isn't anything that should be alarming or surprising in there. Some information and statistics related to some burglaries. We're certainly going to look at getting some information out in the Carey News Weekly about the hide it, lock it, or lose it.
He's in training this week in St. Louis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brian? Thank you. Is there any discussion by the committee of the whole for any requested future items?
I have one item, if I might jump in. I'm not a committee of the whole member, but I just thought could we take the opportunity here with time to touch briefly on the village attorney? I think it's important the community's aware. As was, I believe, in the newspaper this morning, our village attorney, Michael Coppage, has been selected to be a judge representing McHenry County. He served the village for almost 13 years as our corporate counsel for the village of Cary. Mike's done a great job representing a number of elected officials and mayors and staff and others representing Cary's interests. He'll be moving on towards the end of the month. I've been briefing the trustees and seeking your feedback. I'm in the process of establishing the time frame. It looks like October 23rd will be Mr. Coppage's last day serving Cary's contract. I will have a very short, probably carryover process of just a couple of weeks with his firm to complete some assignments that are open, just a couple of weeks. And we'll then we'll have a fresh start. And I'm looking at some interim services for about 4 to 6 months from a corporate counsel, municipal law firm. In the process of working through that now, and I'll touch at the end on that process here in a minute after I detail the rest of this. The concept is to build us a bridge for 4 to 6 months while the community, the village board, goes through the selection process for a permanent municipal law firm for us. My hope, on your behalf, is that we can make decisions for hopefully the next 10, 15 years. Obviously, that's subject to future village board's decisions, but these are decisions and changes that are very important for communities to make in a thoughtful and enlightened way. It's not an easy transition in any corporation or any public body to change. Often it's not like other services we have in public works or others where you can switch pretty quick. It's not quite that simple. So my hope is to help lead you through a process with your guidance towards that 4 to 6 month firm, and then selection on a firm thereafter that will represent all 7 of you well as working with the staff. Probably 80 to 90% of the work is with our staff on different projects and things like that. The important part is that they represent you in doing that work. And so I want to make sure you're a part of that process and feel comfortable. I do feel the need to accelerate the interim process. I'm short-listed down to 2 right now. I'm heading to 3, hopefully, for a more deep discussion process with them to see if they're available to come in this interim basis, because we have meeting nights that are set. And as you understand, in this kind of mid-market range, which I think Cary is at in terms of service level and cost, we need to be thoughtful of the other nights that they have for other towns they already have. I mean, if we have an interim assignment, it's not a permanent assignment necessarily. We probably don't want to make it one at this point at all. So I have to slot that, properly, and then I have to have somebody competent that can handle what they do here sitting at the board table, and then the staff work, but also the prosecution work for village enforcement cases, any special services that we need, labor attorney services if possible through this mix, those kinds of things. So, I'd like to accelerate the interim process. I just wanted to bring it up to you so that I was sure that you were all properly represented in my doing that, and there wasn't any questions or thoughts that you had.
How many attorneys have you gotten resumes or applications or phone calls from since the announcement was made? People interested or firms interested in?
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is there's a lot of interest in the assignment, interim and or permanent. I mean, there is. And the question is, fit, and, what we need, those sorts of things. I mean, there's a lot of, I'll say we've had a handful of people approach us, whether that be the best way to do it or not, I don't know. But I mean, it's obvious to me who the market is for us to consider. I've done some research, and some trustees have asked me for feedback on this. I've been studying this for over 2 years. We have some bid specs from other cities and suburbs that have been through this of late. I've seen bid tabulations and cost. so I know kind of the price point that I think we'll probably be at. It's going to be more expensive than where we're at today. It is. But, I think we're more heading to more of what the market rate is, where we were set at a number before that was what it was more inexpensive. We're probably going to have to look at this from a budgetary standpoint. There's no doubt. But this whole board wants quality service. We want to have some depth at the firm to be able to handle different things. If we have an absence or a vacation or something with a court date, we got to have some other ways to serve that. It's been somewhat challenging at times in the past, looking backwards. But, this is an opportunity for us, I think, to grow as a community. So I just wanted your feedback, and I'm happy to take it tonight or informally from you one-off.
All I have to say is there's two things you don't scrimp on. That's deli meat and your attorney. So I'm not really of the opinion that we need to choose a mid-range attorney. The better attorneys get paid more for a reason. So that's my input on that. What my question would be, since this is an appointment, the interim appointment, is this going to be at the mayor's discretion or your discretion, Chris?
My thought would be that, I'll ask Attorney Coppedge to give you a written answer to that. I think that's the right answer. He's typically not a committee, and I'm not speaking out of school. I mean, I'll ask him to do that tonight for you. So, I think you would have to interim appoint it, be my guess. I absolutely think that. And I just think that's the right thing to do, and probably the thing you have to do. The question is, how do you want to get there? And what I'm saying is, I'm trying to do the legwork for you on your behalf to accelerate it, because I do have a gap, coming in 45 days that I got to fill. And, I want it to be a clean break. I think that's important for us as an organization. And so that requires me to be nimble and have, us covered in that. So, I mean, I went through a similar process for you before some folks were on the board. We had a change in public works during the worst winter in recent history. And between Eric and his predecessor, we brought in interim services and accelerated a process that ended up being huge for us to get work completed, to do it in a thoughtful way, and to help bring Eric here. So, I mean, we've been through, it's different for an attorney process, but, the board has been, nimble in these changes before, and so we have some experience. That's my answer. I agree with you. You don't want to skimp, but you also don't want to overpay. So, I mean, I think it's just a balance of finding that niche for what you need as a board.
And just as a matter of reference, I emailed all of you about if you get anybody questioning or send them all to have Chris go through them all, and everybody will be, that wants to participate in the process will be given an opportunity.
Great. So I want to be very direct because I need to move. I mean, do you want me to interview the firms with, possibly my thoughts would be, obviously some of my key staff can help me in that. Do you want the mayor to be involved in that? Do you want others to be involved in that? I just need to ask because I need to set up meetings now, and I just want to make sure that I follow through with what you all expect, so there's no confusion.
Are we talking about just for the interim, or are we talking about doing both, multitasking here and making the effort to find the permanent person?
I'm talking about interim right now because that has to be done in the next 2 weeks. And I mean, if I feel like the due diligence is done, I might bring this to you on your board meeting on October 20th. I'll see if I can do that. And then you would say, yes, this is the appointment, because the gap starts on the 26th or actually the 24th October. You follow me? So, I mean, that's why I would just like to accelerate and make sure we don't have any issues.
Yeah, given the short deadline, I would say I'm fine with staff. Obviously, when the permanent one,
Yeah,
permanent replacement,
absolutely.
I think the trustees should be more involved, but given that there's such a short, please.
Okay.
I would
There's
agree.
no doubt that the permanent process has got to be, looked
Will
at.
be a
That's why I'm
board
trying to
decision.
give you a 4 to 6 month bridge so you can do it right.
Yeah, I'm fine with that as well, but I would appreciate some communication as to this is who we're interviewing.
Yeah.
And we are, looking firmly at this one maybe, or these
Yeah.
two, so that we have an idea of where this is leaning.
Yeah, I should know. I should be able to tell you that by as early as to close of business tomorrow. but for certain on Thursday. I don't have it finalized yet, but it's close.
Is it possible for us to do something as we did with the police chief, where it, gets winnowed down and then we get to talk to, the people, the prospective attorneys?
Well, you got to be clear on whether you're talking about the interim process. or
The permanent.
Oh, the permanent. I think that we're going to have some
Okay.
level of that without
Right.
doubt from what I say. I mean, but that's my recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anything else? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned.